Hi, I'm Carlton Coffran, and in this video I'll be giving you some reflections on my experience teaching 50,000 plus students online. Let's begin with a little bit of motivation for this talk. Given the recent change to social distancing, there are a lot more online events. And the basic question is, how can we design and execute these online events? I have a little bit of experience in these types of things because since 2012, I developed and co-instructed an online course in discrete optimization, which is available on the Coursera platform, and I've been posting technical talks online since 2016, which has provided some other insights to me about disseminating technical information. So a brief overview of the talk is what are massive open online courses, and what did we learn from them as a larger community. I'll use the discrete optimization MOOC, which I helped develop and co-instruct, as a practical example of this type of content delivery format and discuss some of the successes and challenges of this type of online course. I'll talk then a bit about the impact of on-demand videos that are hosted online and some reflections and recommendations for anyone preparing an online event. So let's get into it with a brief history of MOOCs. First off, what is a MOOC? A MOOC is a purely online course, usually with lots of participants, and it should be open access as well. All of the content in a MOOC is delivered asynchronously. So everything is on demand. That includes the lectures, question answers, homework, grading. In terms of lectures, these are usually pre-recorded videos. The students watch the lectures on their own time, at their own pace, and they can rewatch key segments of the lectures. In terms of question and answers, these are usually handled through forums or some other form of a groupthink platform like Stack Overflow. They're typically moderated by TAs and professors. The assignments are graded automatically. This is the only way to scale to very large class sizes, and near real-time feedback is provided because of the automated grading facility. Most likely you've heard of a platform like edX, Coursera, or Udacity. These are all examples of MOOC delivery platforms. Let's begin with a brief timeline of how MOOCs were originated. So back in 2008, there was this philosophical idea for a connectivist kind of community learning experience by George Siemens, and he's often credited as kind of proposing this first idea of the massive open online course, but it kind of was not widely noticed until in 2011, Stanford Artificial Intelligence course went open access and online. This was co-taught by Peter Norvig and Sebastian Thurn, and it generated an enrollment of over 100,000 students. And this created a lot of excitement that this could be a very transformational learning experience. And then just 1 year later, New York Times declared it was Year of the MOOC. And just for context, the discrete optimization course that I'll be telling you about was developed in 2013, so very close to the beginning of all of this. Now, Gartner has a very nice diagram, which they call the hype cycle, which you can use to interpret technology. So there's some kind of a technology trigger, then there's a peak of inflated expectations. This then crashes to the trough of disillusionment. You have the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. And the point here is that MOOCs have been going through this type of cycle in the past decade. So many believe the technology trigger was this artificial intelligence course, and then we started to develop all of these online platforms, and then this peak of inflated expectations occurred sometime around this Year of the MOOC announcement, and you have folks like Sebastian Thurn saying things like, in 50 years there'll only need to be 10 universities. And then just 1 year later, he was saying things like Udacity MOOCs are really lousy products. So there's the trough of disillusionment. So let's talk a bit about the lessons learned from these different online learning activities, MOOCs specifically. The good news is that this greatly increased the accessibility of university courses. They're able to reach a much broader audience, and especially in international and limited access groups. This had a very big impact. This greatly increased the enrollment in the best courses, so they're much more scalable than we had before. And we also observed that the top students who thrive in the classroom do just as well online. So this really increases the potential for the best students to succeed and get the information they need to learn a specific topic. Now let's talk a bit about the bad news. For the vast majority of students, online courses are really difficult. It's much harder to learn online than it is in person. Only students with kind of an innate interest and self-motivation to succeed can match the classroom outcomes. There are some key challenges in terms of attention span, self-motivation, and it seems that progress monitoring and human intervention, which happens a lot in a classroom setting, is critical for many students to succeed. And these features have not been replicated in most of the online course offerings. So something that's lost from this MOOC format is that the cohort structure of a peer group in the classroom is generally not modeled or pale comparison to going to a real class. And it also seems that the social pressure is an important motivator than anyone really realized to motivating students to succeed in courses. So overall, for acquisition of required knowledge, there are very few advantages over the in-person model, but for the best students, it's doing really well. So you could ask yourself, can we have the best of both worlds? And people have been exploring this, so this is called hybrid learning or the flipped classroom. And the idea here is that students watch pre-recorded videos ahead of time. They meet in person for group discussion and questions. This is a very experimental education format, but it does seem to be successful. I'll also note that gamification has been observed to help increase motivation of students. So it seems to emulate some kind of the social pressure that the classroom setting has and motivate some number of students. So let's talk a little bit about running a massive online course and what we observed in this particular instance. So in 2013 to present, I've been co-instructing this discrete optimization course on the Coursera platform. Pascal van Hentenryck is the primary instructor, and the course is an early graduate level computer science course on how to design algorithms for NP-hard discrete optimization tasks. It was first developed at Brown and kind of honed over 15 years while Pascal was a professor there, and then he joined the University of Melbourne, and that's when we turned it into the online version. The University of Melbourne invested a huge amount of money in making this course extremely high quality, so it's at least $100K just in production costs. That's like video crews, equipment, editing, and it has been a very highly rated course. So I think a lot of the tools we developed as part of this course really succeeded and made it a pretty enjoyable online learning experience. So I'll give you a bit of an overview of what the course is like. So when you develop these online lectures, it's really a battle to hold people's attention. Some things that we've learned through these MOOC experiences is that if the viewer can see a person, it increases their level of attention. Additionally, if the lectures can be entertaining, that also increases the level of attention. So things like humor and storytelling can be very effective in increasing attention span. It's also good to strive for kind of a minimal viable unit of knowledge in each video. So say targeting less than 10-minute videos. It seems that when people can take a break after every 10 minutes of watching, they can maintain a high level of attention much longer than if you say give a 40-minute video. And so in theory, people could do this themselves and take little micro breaks, but if you break it up for them, it actually improves the amount that people will watch. Now, to give you a feeling for how highly produced this course was, I'm going to show a 1-minute clip of Pascal teaching an overview lecture that tries to explain to students how to approach the course, because it's a very difficult creative thinking course. We developed this weatherman style way of presenting where Pascal would look into a camera and have real-time green screen superimposition on top of slides so that he could see himself in front of the slides and have the feeling like he was teaching to a class. And you'll see that he's a very exciting and entertaining lecture.
What I don't want you to do is to think about this beautiful, amazingly perfect algorithm, okay? And you spec it, okay? So you know what you want to implement, okay? And then you start implementing. And this is your degree of happiness or confidence. It's going to decrease over time. And you become, more and more happy. Enough, you can't see any result. You're coding. And then at the end of the assignment period, wow, you have a boost, of happiness because you just solved the problem. But for all the time here, you have been completely unhappy. Your confidence has been going down. And then you have this rush of blood to the head for, 2 weeks. Or, well, actually, here it's going to be like 1 day, right? So in a sense, you don't want that because most of your time is going to be, decreasing happiness and then one big rush at the end. Okay, one high period, okay? So this is the way to do it, right? So you start with a reasonable degree of happiness, okay? And then essentially you start coding and your confidence is going to decrease. And then, wow, you have a first high here because you completed the greedy algorithm. It gives you 7 on a couple of instances. So you say, oh, hey, I feel good, and I'm just at the beginning of this thing, right? And then you say, oh, you look at this greedy and you say, oh, these problems, I can see why it's so bad. And now you start saying, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to implement a local search algorithm, okay? Now your happiness decrease a little bit, you could, but then, wow, another big boost because now you can solve, say 4 or 5 or let's say 6 of the instances. And so you have a 7 on all these things and you say, well, I feel pretty good, but,
So you can see that Pascal is a very exciting and articulate lecturer. It's also interesting to note that we added this lecture after the first round of the course based on feedback we saw on the students giving. They needed more instruction on how to approach the course than we had originally planned. So another aspect of this course is that there was a gamification where we had a leaderboard of the quality of solutions that all the students were producing, and we would rank them for everyone to see. Participation was not required, but we did observe that for some significant portion of students, maybe 2/3, they said this was a motivating factor in their success in the course, where 1/3 were indifferent. And to my surprise, no one said this was like a really negative thing for the course. So the bad news when you're looking at MOOCs like this is that the retention and completion is quite abysmal. So in the first round of this course, we started with about 17,000 people who were interested, and in the end, about 800 finished. And so by a typical, say, retention rate or completion rate, this would be 4.68%. And this was part of why people got a little bit depressed about the success of MOOCs in the early days. Now, if you look at the student participation over time, you'll see that over a 10-week course, it kind of decreases and then levels off for a small cohort of people who are seriously interested in the course. I also looked at the total number of points across all the assignments that were awarded, and you can see that there's quite a diverse distribution here, where many students get a little bit of points, but not enough to complete the course. So in this diagram, essentially B is the point at which you get a pass certificate, and C is when you get a certificate with distinction, meaning you did a really excellent job, and 400 is a perfect score in the course. So there's quite a lot of students fighting for that top distinction. Now, you can see that about 4,000 students were active in the assignments, and this was really, already a huge reduction from the 17,000 number who claimed to have enrolled in the course. And what we decided was that based on this cliff of people not participating or not completing the assignments, that there was actually only about 2,000 students who were really qualified to participate in the course. And one key idea of our analysis was to actually break down this 17,000 number into the active students who were actually participating in the assignments, and then this 2,000 number of qualified students. And interestingly, we could then break down the entire population into different categories, like auditors who have enrolled for the course or watching videos or checking forums, but maybe not really doing the assignments. Then you have the active students who are actively participating in the assignments, and then the qualified students who pass a certain threshold of the simplest assignments. And what you can see here is that if you rescale to just qualified, about 42% of the students completed the course. So that's a much better number than the 4.6. So I think it's important to realize that showing interest or casual viewing of a particular online resource is a big difference than learning online where you have to do assignments and have a very dedicated engagement with the course. Another thing you can observe if you look at the left plot is that the qualified candidates, the percentage of the total population is very stable over time. That's also an interesting observation. So what's the good news about this? You know, the retention is maybe bad news. The good news is that even though many people were not interested, the reach of the course in the first iteration was already quite astonishing. So in 15 years of teaching at Brown University, Pascal taught about 30 students per year, which would be a total of 450 students who passed his course. And in the first session of running this course on Coursera, we had about 800 students succeed. So we essentially doubled in 1 year the total number of students that Pascal had taught this course to. So that's a good example of how this increased scalability can have a really tremendous impact. So what are some of the lessons we learned from this whole experience? I think the first one was reimagining the class for an online format and not replicating the classroom experiment was a key to success. So we also observed that with a Herculean production effort, you are able to make a fairly good approximation of the original class, but this amount of effort is really comparable to writing a textbook. So with the amount of people who are developing slides and recording and editing the videos, making sure the online platform was all configured properly, I mean, this is really a massive undertaking. Another thing we learned is that only the most self-motivated students have the interest to complete the class. You know, you see a lot of people drop out because they try and then they realize it's a lot more work and they don't have the interest in that. So only the really most motivated ones will finish, but maybe this is an acceptable thing. Maybe on-demand content online only needs to be for the most interested people. I think it's important to think about who the audience is and what their motivations for doing the online event are. So with that, I'm going to turn to a little bit of a more general topic, which is the surprising impact of on-demand video content online. Which is just one aspect of the whole MOOC experience. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of giving a technical lecture. How might we measure the impact? You could think about it as like the number of people who viewed your particular lecture, and ideally you'd want to know how long were they really paying attention to it, because many people will zone out like halfway through a middle of a 1-hour talk. So you could see 500 view hours as being a bit of like a home run for a technical lecture. This is like giving a keynote that fills a huge physics auditorium with lots of seats in it. And you could imagine, you know, you've got approximately 500 people's attention for 1 hour. Note that the number of views on anything online is usually about 10x higher than the number of view hours. So view hours is capturing a lot more serious attention levels to a particular video. And that kind of goes back to this student participation graph where views is roughly, you know, like a very coarse optimistic estimate of interest, and view hours is showing a lot of serious interest. So here is a lecture, just as I'll give a few examples of different lectures and the impact they've had. I gave this OptMelb seminar a number of years ago. It was in 2013, and the production value was not particularly great, but it was recorded and posted online, and since then, 2013, it's got 1,500 views, which is a pretty amazing amount of views for this technical lecture without a lot of high quality production value. Another example would be this optimal power flow benchmarking introduction video that I developed as part of my professional service for the IEEE. And since 2017, this has accumulated 800 views and 45 view hours. For example, the people in the room for this meeting is usually around 30 people, 30 to 50 people. So we've reached a much wider audience for this particular video. I should note that the video is much less than 1 hour, so 45 view hours is many, many more than 45 people. Another example is this series of convex relaxation lectures that I developed, where we're basically giving an introduction, me and my co-video maker, Lina Ruald, about a tutorial for power systems optimization and convex relaxation, which is a research topic. This is an incredibly niche topic. In the power systems research community, it's just a small fraction of the research that's going on. But these videos have been a tremendous success. So since 2018, we've had 2,500 views and 150 view hours just on this particular introductory video alone. And there are 8 other videos of similar size. And if you look at the YouTube channel where these videos were posted, you can see this point where basically the amount of viewership of the channel changes dramatically and is consistently higher for 2 years. And this was when we introduced those tutorial lectures. So if you're developing online content and you kind of get lucky or somehow know what the community needs, you can drastically increase viewing for a sustained amount of time. It's not like spiky around the launch of the video. And you can see that all of these top videos for this particular channel are related to this convex relaxations series. So I think the big lesson here from all of these videos is that if you integrate over enough time and they're sitting on the internet long enough, the impact can be really substantial from online on-demand videos. I'll also note that when you look at the average view duration for these videos, many of which are 20 minutes or longer, it's about 5 minutes. And if you remember in the MOOC land, we kind of learned that 10 minutes was a bit of a target for a minimal unit of knowledge in a video. And you can see here that many people are dropping out before the 10-minute mark, which indicates why it's good to try to break it into that size. I know it's very difficult in technical talks, but if you're designing things from scratch, this is a useful target to strive for. So then I'll just suggest some very easy wins I think all technical folks could have in terms of online on-demand video. The first one is if you give a virtual talk or class, record it and put it online. And of course you have to make it easy to find. Things that are online that no one can search for basically don't exist. But just making it available, people will find it, and over enough time there'll be an impact. If you're asked to make a video for a conference, put it online in an open access website that is searchable. So for example, YouTube. So that's another way of getting additional value out of the conference video. You need to be careful about copyright potentially, but try to make it in a way that you can post it online yourself. And of course, if you prepare a talk of any kind, you can do what I'm doing in this particular example and make a voiceover video on top of your slides. This is a far cry from the professional quality videos that we developed for the discrete optimization MOOC, but I do find it brings pretty high value for the amount of effort you have to put into it. Now we'll transition to the last topic in this particular talk, which is some thoughts I have on developing online events. So I'll begin with discussing types of communication, because I think they help you understand what you might do. So if everyone is present at the same time, we can call this a synchronous communication. So this is examples include making a phone call, attending a meeting in the same room, video conference, lectures, live performance. These are all good examples of synchronous communication. Asynchronous communication is where participants come and go at different times. So you could think of a technical publication. You write it once, many people read it at different times. Photos, movies, emails, chat, text. These are all examples of when you can kind of save something and someone else can view it later and get information. So you can also think about what the dissemination level of information is. So you can have one-to-many. So for example, in a lecture hall, one lecturer talks to many students. For a movie, one movie production company makes it for millions of people. So that's one-to-many. Then you have many-to-many communications. So this is an example of like a meeting room where you have a bunch of people talking kind of to each other in a very organic way. Chat rooms also are a good example of online many-to-many communication where many people are kind of cross-talking. Now I think it's an important question for organizers. Does a specific technology enable the desired type of communication? Is it synchronous or asynchronous? And then I think you have to ask yourself, is synchronous communication required or is asynchronous good enough? because there are many advantages to asynchronous. A common approach I see for people going online at this particular time is they take the agenda for an in-person meeting and they try to emulate it as close as possible in an online format. The simplest way of doing this is to take every in-person meeting and replace it with a video conferencing equivalent of that meeting, which is a fully synchronous, many-to-many type of communication. But I would like to recall that this online format of communication reduces motivation and attention span. So it seems quite unrealistic to expect an audience to pay attention in a VC context for the same amount of time that they would have in an in-person context. And additionally, lower production quality will further reduce the level of attention. So if you're not really on top of the technical challenges that you may face from VC, this could be lowering attention even further. And then the question I often ask myself is this live synchronous content delivery worth the effort? Live streaming has numerous technical requirements. You have to manage time zones of many participants. You have to manage bandwidth. You can have connection issues. And I think it's important to ask yourself, what are the benefits of doing these kind of meetings over a video conference rather than just pre-recorded talks that anyone can watch whenever they feel like it? And then the last thing I'll note is that I've seen very limited or poor support for question and answers for online events. If you just do VC equivalent meeting times, you are missing out on all those discussions that people have in between the seminars in an online event. And that is arguably one of the most valuable things that people get out of gathering in a common place at a common time. So these are arguably one of the primary purposes of in-person events, and I have seen very limited emulation of this. So what's missing from these online events? I think the primary one is how do you support many-to-many information exchange across folks? For example, what you have at the coffee breaks of a typical academic conference. Forums and chat seems to work well with a sufficient level of participation from the users. If no one's participating, it's not facilitating any many-to-many communication. It seems that video conferencing can work in small groups, like say 2 to 6 people, but this really requires careful design to make sure it works. When you reach a certain critical number of people, only so many can talk effectively in a many-to-many format, whether it be in person or online. And then, of course, how do you form the groups if you're going to have small groups, and when do they meet? You have the synchronization issues. So all these things present challenges for replicating this online. And then another important thing is how do you support question and answers with presenters of an online event? Asynchronous would be an ideal format, but it's not super obvious. And I think it's important to try to do this, but maybe there aren't the best solutions out there right now. So my recommendation overall would be that one should really start over with a clean slate, designing an online event, decide what the objectives are, and design the online experience from scratch to achieve those particular objectives or goals. Just replicating what was working in person, I think, leads to a very suboptimal experience online. So here's some suggestions I can give to organizers of online events. The first one would be lower your expectations. You should have fewer presentations in terms of total view time minutes, and you should be striving for regular breaks between sessions or asynchronous communication. You really need to give people more time to relax or disengage from the video content to maintain a similar level of attention. When possible, I would strive for 5 to 10 minute highlight style videos and try to avoid the longer format if possible. And then only do synchronous events when it really brings a significant added value to the experience. And think about this many-to-many communication between small groups is where synchronous can really bring additional value. It's less obvious in a one-to-many situation that synchronous communication is necessary. I would also highly recommend to archive as much as possible of the content online and provide it as open access where it's easily searchable, because as the data I showed you on on-demand videos is concerned, a long-standing asynchronous content dissemination results in massive amounts of value because you're integrating over a significant amount of time. So last but not least, I would say that exploring innovative technologies can be potentially very impactful, but you need to be very careful of the audience's learning curve. Usually people don't want to learn a new system, especially if it's particularly complicated, for a very short event. If it's not so hard to learn, potentially it could be quite effective. All right, so let's conclude with an overview of everything I've discussed in the talk. So online dissemination, information dissemination is less effective in person, but usually reaches a much broader audience. So overall, you're having a much bigger impact. Remember that viewer attention span is short, like 10 minutes, when developing online content. Significant video production efforts can improve a viewer's attention, but the bulk of the benefits from the online format can be achieved with minimal technical requirements, so like slides with an audio track. So I wouldn't be shy from doing it. Online events should be redesigned from the ground up rather than trying to virtually replicate in-person activities. You should use asynchronous communication for large groups, one-to-many communication, and synchronous is only relevant for small many-to-many communications. So with that, I'll thank you very much for viewing this video. I'm sure it's more than 10 minutes long, but it was the easiest thing I could do given the content and production that I had. So I hope you enjoyed it and you found these suggestions useful.